Hello, this is Mike Bithell, creator of Thomas Was Alone and John Wick Hex, and you're listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Welcome one, welcome all to episode 92 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded on Friday, July 23rd, 2021. I'm your host, Luke Lohr, the InsipidGhost. In this episode, we welcome Joe Winter, solo developer for the upcoming title Song of Iron, on to discuss his work in the gaming industry, from all the way back into Neverwinter through to Halo Infinite, and now to his solo efforts of Song of Iron. We'll discuss the latest news coming out of EA Play, including the return of fan-favorite Dead Space. Activision has been hit with a major lawsuit regarding discrimination of women and minorities, and Ubisoft has a new free-to-play shooter on the horizon. Enjoy. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the Gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I am wont to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness go to Mr. Famous Seamus himself for always writing in and being supportive of each and every episode that I put together. It is always nice to know that people are willing to listen, willing to contribute, and be supportive in every way possible. Moreover, Famous Seamus goes out of his way to make sure that his questions are logical, they make sense, and they're always with an eye towards equality. That is noted and appreciated, Famous Seamus. And in a similar vein, I also want to give a shout out and words of kindness to the various community managers for all different number of games out there in the gaming space. I see quite often from many different gaming communities that community managers have some of the toughest jobs out there. Managing expectations, communicating with fans, with gamers, recognizing complaints at various times. They certainly take a lot of heat throughout the gaming industry, and that can be difficult. And I just wanted it to be noted that without any one specific CM in mind, I appreciate the work that goes into that, to cultivating a community that is healthy and vibrant, to support the developers in their project and creation. It does not go unnoticed there either. And so if you guys, as listeners, ever have a chance to say a kind word or offer a kind note to a community manager, please take the time to do so, because goodness knows they put up with a lot of abuse, and they certainly have to manage a lot of expectations, and that's got to be tough. All right, guys, let's get to plenty of news for this week. Well, this was a weird week of gaming news. We got a new shooter from Ubisoft announced, fan favorites from EA Play stuff, terrible news coming out of Activision, and Death's Door released, which is just one of the coolest games out there. I've been loving Death's Door. Strongly recommend you guys check that one out. There's also a really cool game that dropped into Game Pass called Raji from an Indian developer, and that is just a dope title that I really hope more eyes get on, and I hope to talk to that team at some point. But as far as news items to discuss this week, let's start first with EA Play Live. I joined Mr. Badbit over on his Twitch channel to live react to this one, and it was a strange event to have to react to, because on the one hand, EA did a very good job at setting expectations. They told us what would not be there, nothing from the Skate team per se, though we got a small update from them. We also knew there'd be no Star Wars news from this EA Play Live. So I was already going in with very tempered expectations. That said, I really appreciated knowing what not to get my hopes up for, right? I still held out for Titanfall 3, and that didn't happen. But when companies go out ahead of time and say, hey, this will not be there, please set expectations accordingly, it is all that much more appreciated. I love it when I see Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo do that. Some of them do it very well, some not. EA did get ahead of it in a couple different elements there. This event was hosted by Xavier Woods, Austin Creed, of WWE fame, and if you're a Gears player, of course, the New Day is in Gears as well. One of the best parts about Austin Creed is his love of video games and his ability to diversify, to put on a great show, not just in WWE, but over with G4 and in his own efforts at Up, Up, Down, Down. And he absolutely nailed it. He did a great job hosting this event. It was awesome to see him out there having fun, balancing the hosting duties with just genuine passion and enjoyment. So cheers to him. He's somebody that I absolutely would love to interview at some point as well. But they started the EA Play Live event by celebrating Codemasters, who EA acquired, I believe, towards the end of 2020. They picked up Codemasters, who are experts in their field and masters of their craft when it comes to racing games. And this kind of tangentially related to their showing of F1 2021, a franchise that I couldn't really care about personally, not really into myself, and yet I still thought it showed quite well. Racing games outside of Forza Horizon more and more are not for me, and yet I really could tell there was a sincere effort to make F1 relevant. They have this live action story mode that's reminiscent a bit of 2K and a few other titles out there in the sports sphere. And you always kind of run that risk when it comes to EA. Like, are you just going to get a full spotlight on sports games, or are they going to diversify a little bit? Because sports is their massive amounts of revenue, not their single-player efforts for story-driven games. But I thought they balanced it quite well. F1 showed well. Codemasters is a great pickup for any company, and EA certainly could use it. That there needs to be an infusion of excitement into that Need for Speed franchise, perhaps Grid or something else. I mean, who knows how Codemasters will truly be used. Nonetheless, I was glad to see them there and celebrated. It echoed in ways for me as an Xbox host in seeing the way they celebrated Codemasters, very similar to how Xbox celebrated Bethesda, making sure that, hey, you're part of the family, you are not forgotten, you are not going to be isolated and just cast off aside, you still get to have your own identity, and that seems to be the right way to go about acquisitions, as it were. The next game that kind of stood out to me past Apex Legends stuff, which is promising. They had a lot of cool Apex stuff, though I have fallen off a bit of the Apex train, was a smaller title called Lost in Random. I believe that's Thunderful that's working on that one, I think. I need to confirm that. But this was a really charming game that felt like a Tim Burton esque visual aesthetic, meeting a bit of the humor and storytelling of what Psychonauts 2 looks to be. I really liked this title. A lot of elements of D&D kind of mixed into this third-person platformer, a lot of things that exist in the world of random, hence the name, and there's a lot of chance that goes about it, different types of power-up cards and perks that can be used, and one of the characters is a anthropomorphic dice, like a die, right? Like that you would roll. He's got arms and legs, and it really makes sense. They're really kind of hammering in this idea of random chance being a method of progression in storytelling. But it also had platforming and combat elements as well. Lost in Random is a title that I'm very keen on, and it surprised me. It kind of reminds me a bit of as the aforementioned Death's Door and a few other of these indie titles that really take the cake on being super charming, and I really hope that there is a renaissance of platformers for sure. Lost in Random looks to be one of them, and I'm stoked for it for sure. The next thing was Battlefield 2042. 2042, right? Not 3? Now I gotta look it up because now it's Battlefield 2042. Obviously, I psyched myself out there, guys. I was like, is it 2043? 2043 is not the name of the title. I did it again. See? Look at me. I'm having a whole time here. Battlefield 2042 was a game that I did not think I could get more excited for. Not because I was so hyped, but because, all right, it's another shooter. It's Battlefield. Looks great. A lot of discussions around the $70 price point. Really, what are you going to do for me in a fall that is crowded, right? Where Halo Infinite's coming out. Do I care about Battlefield? The answer after EA Play is a resounding yes. Absolutely. Battlefield looks more Battlefield than ever, with Levolutions going on and all types of vehicles being put into play. But something that was just standout incredible was Battlefield Portal, which brings in this insanity and awesomeness of the video game world in that you can bring in characters from different eras of combat, meaning you can have very modern Ospreys in the 2042 timeline battling, Nazi Germany type tanks and vehicles and soldiers. You can go in there with Vietnam era weapons and battle against 2010s weapons. There were a mixing and mashing of all types of vehicles and weapons that were in place. It was awesome. The character loadouts look customized by era, by faction. I was really impressed by what I saw, and I'm really excited to see how they play with this. Video games can sometimes get overly bogged down with realism, and I think Battlefields 1 and 5 really kind of did that, right? There was a lot of good gameplay there, but it got bogged down in the era. 2042 looks to be a very last-ditch, strong effort to bring Battlefield into relevance. It's very similar to Infinite in that way, in that this is their chance to take a big chunk out of the other military shooters of Call of Duty, the free-to-play markets. I'm talking about Infinite at this moment, like with Destiny and Fortnite. But this was an effort for Battlefield to really bring itself into relevance. And as such, they're letting gamers go nuts and play with different types of things through Battlefield Portal. So I'm really stoked on this one. I still think they've got a tough time justifying a $70 price point next to free-to-play elements. I'm in on that $70. I want to make that clear. I'm in to pay $70 and have a great Battlefield experience. I will not be playing Call of Duty this year for reasons that we'll share in just a bit. But whether or not I play Battlefield when Infinite comes out will be the question. So their release timing of later on in October, I want to say Battlefield is October 22nd. Though I've seen 18th. I think that's an edition thing, like which edition you pay for. But nonetheless, kind of that mid to late October will really be interesting to see where Call of Duty launches and Halo Infinite launches, where Crossfire X lands in there. They've also got Far Cry 6 and Back 4 Blood kind of surrounding them in that launch window. So some interesting elements to the timing of it. But I'm in on Battlefield 2042, and I was very pleased and impressed with what I saw from that showcase. I know my buddy Joseph Moran of the Trophy Room, who sucks and I hate him, he was so excited. He's a Battlefield lover. And then, of course, I follow a lot of people on Twitter who are just diehard Battlefield fans, and they were in. And so their excitement led to me being excited. So that's kind of cool, right? Like when it bleeds off on you. I hope that I'm able to do that for you guys with a couple other games as well. The big thing from this EA showcase, though, was the announcement and the reveal that Dead Space is officially getting its remake. Dead Space is a strong fan favorite. People were absolutely excited for it. Austin Creed ended the show taking players into the trailer of Dead Space, and everything I've seen, very positive. It was listed as PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series SX. No mention of PS4 or Xbox One, which I'm very pleased about, truth be told. I really want to see what this now current gen set of hardware can do with a franchise like Dead Space. For it to be a remake and not a remaster is also exciting. It's not a sequel. There will be no microtransactions. And I'm really in to see where this goes. There's been a comfortable renaissance of platformers and of the horror genre over the last few years. And I like that. I think Resident Evil is teaching a lot of companies that horror can be done and be done right without just doing jump scares. Dead Space to me was always more terrifying than Resident Evil 4, which is saying something, because Resident Evil 4 at its time scared the mess out of me in a dark room with the sound up. So I'm really stoked on this one. I'm curious to know when it really is going to launch. But in a heartwarming thing, we saw that the Callisto Protocol team, they're the original developers behind Dead Space, they tweeted out their support and their excitement to watch EA kind of bring their brand back to it, because they're making a game that is a spiritual successor to Dead Space, because prior to this, EA wasn't going to make it. So I think that's great. For any fans listening, you can play Dead Spaces 1 through 3 on Game Pass and EA Access, so I strongly recommend that. I loved 1. I don't even remember if I finished 2, but it was great. 3 I didn't get into. I know people call that the black sheep of the franchise because it's a bit more arcadey. That sounds fun to me, but not necessarily horror-esque, so I understand that. Let me know how you guys feel about this one. At InsipidGhost on Twitter, insipidghost@gmail.com. I thought EA Play was a pretty good showcase, all things considered, because we knew Star Wars wouldn't be there. Still want Titanfall 3, though. In a more sobering news article, a lawsuit has been filed against Activision Blizzard for harassment and discrimination against women in their workplace. The California Department of Fair Employment and Housing has filed a lawsuit against Activision Blizzard for, quote, violations of state civil rights and equal pay laws, end quote, regarding the treatment of women. Now, this comes from an article initially released by Bloomberg, and I plucked it from gamesindustry.biz. A lot of allegations going on after a 2-year investigation into the studio by the state agency that alleged a frat boy-like culture that was a breeding ground for harassment and discrimination against women. That is wild and awful and painful to note, but it's the details that tend to be quite a bit more cringeworthy. I'm going to read you a quote from this lawsuit that says, quote, in the office, women were subjected to cube crawls in which male employees would drink copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through the various cubicles in the office and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees. Male employees would proudly come to work hungover, play video games for long periods of time during work while delegating their responsibilities to female employees, engage in banter about their sexual encounters, and talk openly about female bodies and joke about rape, end quote. That is awful to hear, and my goodness gracious, is it just insanity. This suit was filed last Tuesday by the Los Angeles Superior Court, and Activision Blizzard, which is made up of about 20% women, assigns women and women of color to lower paid and lower opportunity levels with lower starting pay for similar work as their male counterparts. That is atrocious to hear. It is not necessarily surprising given the often toxic workplaces that male-dominated fields can sometimes be. Moreover, it sounds like a lot of these things were well past the jovial, joking, camaraderie type things that you might see in a workplace, but well into the wildly inappropriate and uncomfortable elements of it. And that absolutely sucks. None of this is going to get better, though, until sales are affected. Activision is not going to genuinely, truly change their behavior, nor will any video game company likely change their behavior until their dollar sales are affected. It's applaudable, really and truly, it's applaudable that we see so many social media callouts and a general wave of support for victims. But companies run on dollars, and oftentimes the heads of companies, I mean, Bobby Kodik's the head of Activision, for God's sake, the heads of companies are often, not always, but often devoid of compassion in favor of money. And that has led me to a decision very seriously to stop buying Activision games. And that sucks. Call of Duty, Diablo, which I was really looking forward to this year, Crash games. I'm no longer going to be buying Call of Duty games, or sorry, Activision games, I should say. And that really does kind of stink because you want to support the people that were genuinely working hard there, but I don't think a statement is really going to be genuinely, truly heard. I love the social media waves and the callouts and the supports for victims, but it's dollar sales that are going to matter here. And so, given all that's going to be happening this fall, plenty of games to go around, given the gravity of these sentiments and statements that we're seeing come out after a 2-year investigation, I'm not spending money there, and I'll comfortably admit I'm also doubting some of the Ubisoft approaches of late. They've still yet to clean up things and get their act together over at Ubisoft, and I'm struggling kind of morally with where the line is, right? Like, where is the line for me in entertainment to say no more, right? Because these companies do run on dollars, and Activision kind of crossed a point for me internally. Ubisoft is on and off there for sure. I mean, I hear mixed things at various points, but it really stinks. And I think the decision to not buy Activision titles is made a bit easier because there is a crowded fall. But this irks me, and it stinks because I like Call of Duty, right? And I was really looking forward to Diablo, but there's no place in the games industry for that level of toxicity in a workplace. And nobody should be subjected to things like pub crawls or being delegated to smaller duties and paid less and jokes made about rape at their expense. Like, that's just wild to me. And I will not support that, knowing that it exists there. And I really hope Activision and other companies, which I'm sure this happens in, are able to clean up their act. It has to happen. It has to get better. Yeah, it has to. So, a sobering and difficult topic to talk about. If you are hearing this and reflecting upon behaviors of your past or things that you've seen, behaviors of other people around you, really take that time, reflect on it, do your best to figure out how you can grow and be better. We all mature at different rates, but there are lines that cannot be crossed. But allow yourself to be educated and listen to ways to make yourself better. Man, it's a difficult topic to even like to have a conversation about it. It's so sobering and it's difficult to even like talk about without, I don't know. It's weird. But my heart goes out to those victims who were subject to that level of harassment. And yeah. All right, moving on. Well, I mentioned Ubisoft in the last story. I'm mentioning them again here for this next story, but not necessarily for the same levels of sobriety that need to take place. Ubisoft announced a new shooter that combines many of its franchises into a free-to-play first-person experience. It is called xDefiant. xDefiant. And it's a variety of competitive 6v6 arena and linear game modes such as Domination and Escort. It combines a large pool of uniquely designed maps in rotation, and no two matches will feel the same. You'll get to personalize your Defiant playstyle. You'll be able to choose factions, traits, and abilities along with your ultras. Mind you, these factions are from all different types of Tom Clancy franchises, from The Division to Rainbow Six. Maybe even some Splinter Cell in there, but it's definitely not a Splinter Cell game. That is awkward and strange. The Wolves, Outcast, Cleaners, and Echelon factions will battle across iconic locations and combine a ton of things from the Clancy universe. I watched the reveal of this. I watched the trailer for it, and I came away just as baffled as can be. I'm still confused why this wasn't at their Ubisoft Forward a month ago. Why would they wouldn't sit on that Ubisoft Forward and let this kind of be in that presentation? Maybe it looks too much like Rainbow Six to have in a presentation with Rainbow Six. And yeah, it does look a lot like Rainbow Six. There is a weird art style here that's reminiscent of Rage 2 and Watch Dogs, but there's Tom Clancy stuff taking place. There's an emoji in the title, which is weird. I have a lot of just confusing sentiments around this Ubisoft shooter. I have to imagine that no matter how good a thing Ubisoft makes at this point, whether it's a great free-to-play first-person shooter, and all signs point to it being well-produced, no matter how good anything Ubisoft does, if they don't talk Splinter Cell, no one's going to let them off the hook. The YouTube comments were not kind. The live chatter on socials were not necessarily kind. And that stinks, by the way, because the shooter itself does look good. And it does look like there's a good team behind it. It's just that no one's asking for this. I do not need another military shooter at the expense of development resources that could go towards something I do want, like a stealth action game in Splinter Cell. When you've got Call of Duty, Halo Infinite, Battlefield 2042, Crossfire X, all launching in your fall, next to pre-established games like Rainbow Six Siege, like Destiny, like Fortnite, like Apex Legends. Who's asking for xDefiant, right? Slipgate just came out. That seems to be doing very well in its preview form. Valorant still exists and is doing rather well. The previous Ubisoft Battle Royale Hyperscape, ain't nothing happening on that front. It's just a strange thing. And Ubisoft sometimes does a really good job at creating experiences I want. Watch Dogs Legion, Immortals. Other times, baffling decisions. Sometimes the decisions make perfect sense. I'm thinking about Assassin's Creed Infinity, I want to say they called it. But the live service Assassin's Creed makes perfect sense. This, I don't know if it makes perfect sense, man. Weird, strange. Make Splinter Cell. Let's get to listener mail now. Several of you were good enough to write in, despite me putting the call out for listener mail a couple days early. I'm on a time crunch here, so shout out to those of you who I weren't able to get questions in for. I know Famous Seamus and Dano and a few others wrote in questions that I'm just not able to get to because of this time crunch. I'm going on vacation, headed to Galaxy's Edge. Super excited for that. But I have a couple questions here that I'm going to get to. This first one comes from Mr. Lord James Suddy, who says, what entertainment tech, if any, Are you bringing while you go on vacation? I have become accustomed to bringing quite a lot because I have kids. Chromecast, Blu-ray player is key, but now that with Game Pass, I'm bringing more. Suddy, I am bringing, outside of my phone, which is kind of standard, right? I'll bring my tablet and my Razer Kishi, and that's it as far as tech. Beyond that, I'm just taking books. We have a couple-hour flight down to Florida. We're there for two days, and then we're flying back the day after, so it's a 4-day trip all around. I'll bring books. I have the latest Halo book from Kelly Gay that I'm going to be reading. That's pretty much all I'm bringing there. Tech-wise, I understand why you're asking. If I was staying at a relative's house and not a hotel or something in a place where I'll be outside of the hotel room, I would be bringing more, maybe an Xbox One controller or a Series S controller. But yeah, not too much on this front. I'll bring my tablet to read comics and my book to read, and maybe the Razer Kishi just to have if I feel like it. But really and truly, not a lot of tech this time around. Different type of trip, perhaps. But good question. Garrett Bland wrote in. Garrett Bland, good to have you listening again, man. I love you lots, buddy. He says, with Steam Deck arriving next year, should Xbox work with Valve to implement Windows Game Pass natively or have an xCloud Game Pass app on the custom Steam OS? Garrett Bland, absolutely they should. Absolutely. Xbox should be talking to Valve. In fact, they are talking. It's a secret. It's a secret that everyone knows. They are indeed talking. They should be doing everything possible to get Game Pass on that device. That is going to be key to both of their successes, I think, because the Steam Deck, I know I said this last week, Steam Deck's going to do really well out the gate, and I think it's going to fall flat after that. Not a lot of kids are going to be going up and asking mommy and daddy for a $500, $600, with a good memory, mind you, almost portable device to play PC games on. Right? I don't think that's going to be happening. Then that's what happens with Switch. People are like, hey, can I get a Switch? So I think the people that are into it and in the know are going to gobble up those pre-orders, check it out. It's going to be really cool, but they're not going to be selling out past that first initial wave or couple waves. So I hope that they get Game Pass on there natively. I hope it's built in. They find a way to make it work because I think it's going to be key to both of their successes. And Game Pass for PC gets a lot of love. But it is still a little bit of a mess in terms of curation, so it'd be nice to see a little bit of love there too. Good question, sir. Court Lalonde writes in with the last question of this week, and he says, why do you think the Series S doesn't get the respect it deserves? I have both, and I find the S to be the best value in gaming. Court, that's a great question. You don't actually see a lot about the S in the mediascape at the moment, but I think that's largely because everything's sold out anyway, and there's no reason to push the S. The S is Microsoft's not-so-secret weapon towards combating budgets, right? Once they get S's into production at a rate where they're not sold out every time, then they can start marketing the system in a different way. It does no good to market a system like crazy if you can't keep it on shelves because it's already selling out. They'll probably ramp up a lot more verbiage and dialogue about the Series S and just, what it can do for you later on. Once they need to start moving units, and they need to have Series S specific games. Right now, all the games are back and forward combat, right? They're cross-generational. No reason to rush your marketing when everything's already off the shelves. So I think you'll see a lot more about the S as it goes. I want an Xbox Series S so badly. Haven't been able to find one just yet. I want it for downstairs so I can play games downstairs with my wife and play games with my wife, and it's just not doable right now. So I think the Series S is a good secret weapon. I mean, we have a $300 console that can play next-gen stuff. That's where it's at. I don't know. I need to start making some phone calls and trying to find one for myself. That's for sure. All right, guys, that is going to do it for this portion of the episode. We are going to be talking with Joe Winter, the creator of Song of Iron, about his time in the gaming industry. He's worked on Neverwinter, the MMO. He's worked on Star Trek Online. He's worked on a game called Halo Infinite, and he'll talk a bit about that. Not too much, nothing like reveal-y, spoilery, but it was cool to hear his thoughts on just Halo Infinite. And then he's got a game that he is solo making called Song of Iron, and it's really exciting. It's launching later on in August. So stoked for you guys to hear this interview from him. I'm sitting on an interview with Hero Concept. They're making a really cool brawler called Mayhem Brawler. which is a cool 2D Streets of Rage like game. Sitting on that one, I'm going to clean that up post-vacation and then put that one on an upcoming episode as well. And I got a few other things brewing for you also before my fall gets crazy going back to work. That's going to be it for me, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Enjoy the interview with Joe. Take care, guys. I am very fortunate now to welcome to the show Joe Winter, who is the creator of Song of Iron, coming to an Xbox near you soon. Joe, how are you, sir?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing really well. Happy to be here.
I'm ecstatic to have you. I love talking to developers about what it is they're doing, their time in the industry, and just what they hope to accomplish with their games. I'm really excited for Song of Iron. I totally have this. I want to hear the elevator pitch for Song of Iron, but first, I think it would be great if you let listeners know a little bit about yourself and your time in the gaming industry prior to landing on this solo project.
Yeah, sure. I've been an animator in games for coming on 15 years now, which feels crazy, but it just keeps going. I got into the industry initially with a small studio called Play Mechanics. They worked on Big Buck Hunter and Terminator Salvation, the arcade games. You might see those in like theaters or bars, depending on where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty classics, but like hilariously small studio. And, it was an amazing kind of like first touch into the industry. I learned a lot from that. And then I got a job at Cryptic Studios, which is an MMO house. Worked on Star Trek Online, Champions Online, and Neverwinter Online.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved that place. It was, MMOs, players will just eat through that content like, there's no tomorrow. And so I really I learned how to move fast and to make and like animate really quickly. And it was just this amazing like training montage of my career. So, it's really fun. I really like that. And then from there, that was like 7 years, I think I was there. And then I was lucky enough to land a spot at 343 working on Halo 5 as a contractor originally. And then I went full time, and I was there for 6 years altogether, I think. And then,
wow.
it was like 2 years of 5, and then the, post-launch support, and then basically 3 or 4 years of Infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And I left in December because of Song of Iron. Song of Iron had kind of picked up enough that I felt comfortable leaving a wonderful, comfortable job at Microsoft for the scary unknown of indie development. And that's been 6 months now. What is it? 7 months now, and it's been going great. I love it. I absolutely love working in the indie way, and
That's incredible. Well, that brings up a lot of questions from how MMOs work versus AAA development and live service, all the way to indie. What do you think the biggest difference between you being an indie creator now is from, say, working at some of the major studios? My mind jumps to 343, obviously, but any of the others.
Yeah, I think the bigger the studio, the smaller your role is, and so inevitably, I mean, there's sort of two things. At 343, I really, really specialized in a specific set of animation. I at the end there, I was the lead character animator on all the enemies. So anything that you fought, I was in charge of to some extent for animation. And at Cryptic, which was much smaller, I was at times in charge of all the animation on a single project. Not that I was making all of it, but I was in charge of all of it because there was only 3 or 4 animators working on one of those games. But still, all we were in charge of was animation. On the indie side, one of the things that makes it so fun is that I'm in charge of, literally everything. I'm, going from the story creation to the animation to the art to the lighting to the coding, all that stuff. So what I think that gets indie developers that doesn't always work in the bigger studios is like this really clean idea that the person who's making it is also the person who's like making the decision on the concepts. If that, I kind of said that backwards maybe, but and it's something that happens at bigger studios is, like the director of the game will have the idea. They'll tell all of their sort of directors, then that'll go down to the leads, and then that'll go down to, the next person. And there's this long chain of telephone that happens. And of course we do, you're checking always to see if the idea, if it works, and the director's checking on it, but you're still trying to make somebody else's vision. And that can be tough with art, and you're trying to like understand it and do all of your what you're really good at, but you need all this information, and it's never, it always kind of is diluted through people and stuff. And obviously some games still kill it. There's plenty of amazing AAAs like that. I'll never say that that's not true, but I any one of those studios is gonna know that feeling of like, okay, we need to redo this because it's not what this person wanted.
Do you feel an extra sense of pressure with a bigger franchise or brand? And I'm thinking Halo and Neverwinter kind of in that realm. Is there a bigger sense of pressure even though you're playing that telephone game?
Yeah, totally. And I think those are the ones that I think are probably the hardest because, like I've been a Halo fan all my life, and you get there and someone says, let's do this thing. And I instantly, I'm translating their comment through the lens of my experience with Halo and what I think makes Halo Halo. And being part of those studios, everybody has a slightly different view of what makes Halo Halo. And so, and then the fans have their own, and it's this crazy balance act. And so you really have to really dive deep into those conversations with people and make sure that what you're working on is what they want, and and everybody's in agreement and stuff. And it's pressure is maybe not the right word, but there's definitely an emphasis on paying attention to that sort of thing, especially when you're trying to protect something that people have grown up with and love and will care very much about when it comes out and everything.
And you were fairly deep into Infinite development. I mean, you left to make Song of Iron roughly 6 months ago. So do you feel a sense of awkwardness, I guess, looking at this incredible solo project you've got, but also knowing that Infinite's kind of on its way and would have been out at one point, in development? Is that weird for you?
No, it's one of those things. You never want to leave at a bad time for the team or anything like that, and it's like you just can't. Things are just inevitable sometimes, and I had hoped that the original launch would have worked the way it did, and what it was planned for, and it would have worked out perfectly for me in that case. But things happen, and
sure,
it's going to happen. And it's one of those things where I definitely try to make it obvious really early on. I talked to my my managers and stuff, and worked with the team to make a really smooth transition, and to make sure I didn't leave anybody high and dry or anything like that. But I still talk to everybody there, and some of my best friends became people who I work with became really, really good friends, and so we stay close, and I know how things are going, and we just work together as much as we can.
How often do you get pride for infinite details and secrets? That's got to be a thing that happens all the time.
I think people know that there's like the last thing anybody wants is some animator spilling the beans on a thing that isn't ready to be talked about. So people are generally pretty nice about
well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. I'll tell you when I knew your experience, and I was like, man, I feel like I have to ask, but I don't want to. It was like one of those funny like podcaster things.
Yeah, I love I love talking about it, and there's so many good things that come out of studios like that, and I loved my time at the studio and at Microsoft, and the animation crew has been amazing, and
yeah. Well, cheers to their success and to the work that you'll probably get to take pride in once that releases.
Yeah,
but
2 games this year.
Yeah, that's kind of what that was going to be my transition, man. You'll see 2 products of your work launch this year. I mean, we're not too far away from the release date of Song of Iron. 6 months ago, you started solo work. When did genuine production just begin on Song of Iron? How long have you been working on it?
I think it's been pretty much 2 years this month. Wow. Yeah, it was like 2019, about July is when I started working on it.
So the majority of the work was pandemic based then?
Most of it was pandemic, yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. How did that go for you mentally?
I mean, realistically, as far as Song of Iron goes, it made it better. I mean, I'm fine being in a room by myself for hours and hours and hours, and it just sort of afforded me more excuse to do that. And so I happily, grinded away on Song of Iron at night and worked at 343 during the day, and it was fantastic. It also, like in weird ways, E3 kind of was delayed and pushed till I think it was June or July of 2020, and because of that, so that's why Song of Iron got to be in the pre-show for that for Xbox, and it was a tiny clip in a montage, but still, it was just the beginning of sort of the Xbox crew finding it, and yeah, it was crazy.
Did it showing up in Xbox have to do with your relationship with 343? Because we've had Clayton Kozleric was on talking about some of his personal projects and how they were kind of Xbox specific. He's a manager at Xbox, so I wondered, is that why that ended up that way?
No, actually, it had nothing to do with it, luckily. And even after it had started, we had to do some like anti-corruption, which sounds really dramatic, but like Microsoft has its own department to make sure no funny business is going on. And so we kind of went through that. Basically, I think it was February, I had a Reddit post that did really well, front page gaming, and then Reddit in general. And that's how Nick at ID at Xbox found me. And he had seen that, and then he reached out, and it went from there. And I kind of was like, I work at 343, like I have to like do all this, like make sure everything's okay. I had to tell like my managers and stuff, and everything cleared, and it was all good. And it's just, it's one of those, they don't want like people giving buddies deals for no reason, that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, and it's very specifically, I mean, I can talk about that I work at 343 now that I'm gone, but when I was there, I couldn't mention it. I could never use the correlation in any way. It's more so like I can't say I work at 343 and I'm making this game. So
gotcha.
It couldn't sap some of that excitement.
Absolutely. Well, tell me the elevator pitch for Song of Iron, because I know how I would describe it poorly, and I want to hear your elevator pitch and how you would describe it to a listener that hasn't seen it just yet.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, elevator pitch is always tough for me, which is funny enough, but we'll see how it goes. So Song of Iron is an action adventure side scroller, much in the vein of a Limbo or an Inside. I'm very inspired by those games, but I kind of asked myself at one point, like, what would those games be if it was a Viking instead of a kid and there was combat and stuff like that? And so I started working on Song of Iron, and Song of Iron is a dark Nordic world where you are basically on your own fighting through Vikings and monsters and trolls and all this sort of fantastical enemies, and it's just a game that I wanted to feel like a super immersive Nordic experience. I wanted to have combat feel really gritty and visceral and very John Wick-like. I didn't want you to worry about keeping the super weapon or anything like that, so I put all of the fun stuff in the gear, so you can throw your weapons, you can break shields on people, you can do all this stuff and not worry about it, because you can just grab all of their gear and move on. And I just wanted to make something that was fun and made you feel like a badass hero. And that's basically what Song of Iron boils down to.
I love that you're saying you have the inspirations of Limbo and Inside, because I can see it when I look at GIFs, when I look at videos and even stills. And it is more combat intensive, at least in what I'm seeing. Than those games, but you seem to be doing a lot of work with lighting and shadow. Am I overreading into that?
No, totally. I think, a lot of the inspiration too, just in general, was from just the old school side scrollers, but, knowing that engines and technology allows us to do a lot of cool stuff. I'm just playing with light as much as I can. I've got, one of the main elements of the game visually is dynamic lighting, where, you have a flaming axe you're walking around with, and it's all casting shadows and doing all that nice fun stuff. And because I've got the side scroller kind of locked perspective, I can push more intense lighting than your average game can, and that allows for that to really stand out a lot, I think.
One of the things I love is seeing enemies or your character holding something that is on fire, and the way the shadows are cast as you move about stealthily before you go into combat.
Yeah.
I would have to imagine that is your skill as an animator from years past really coming into play here.
Yeah, it definitely helps. The animation helps the most with like the combat, making things feel really nice for the player. Like every time you push a button, hopefully something, that feels good, both because you do something cool, but also because what you do looks really cool or looks good. And um, the combat is all sort of tried to be really naturalistic timing, so it feels a little slow initially because it's more realistic, and I think in the end that actually feels really good. And that was one of the things I wanted to do with my ability to animate, and just for the feeling of the game, trying to feel really grounded and realistic and stuff.
We should note that I'm consistently asking, what are you doing? Like you specifically. That's because nearly everything in this game is just you as a solo developer. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So tell me what that entails, and what it is that you're not doing on Song of Iron.
Sure. Basically, I mean, so the two things that I'm getting help on are, and both of them are audio based, is the sound design and the music. So I have a composer that's composed a completely original soundtrack for the game. Will Ghost, he's done an amazing job. That's all the music that's been in the trailers and so on has been him. Both composed and performed by him. And then I have a group, Strikecast Audio, that's helping me with sound design. Two things that I desperately am terrible at, and I knew, especially music, there was no way that I could do it on my own, and I didn't want to buy, sort of the right tracks and then have those be heard all like in different places. We really went all in on the Viking Nordic kind of mythology vibe with the music. We bought in like a really traditional instrument to like put that in everything, and so that's been really great. And then sound design, it's a tough thing. I mean, there's massive studios to, specifically for it to get really good stuff. And I'm not an audio person. I wouldn't know the first thing. And so that was two avenues of the game I really wanted professional help on. Mm-hmm. And that sort of came apart about once the game sort of had picked up enough that I was like, okay, yeah, it's definitely going to be worth doing this. But other than the audio side, I'm doing animation, character art, environment design. I'm coding, the entire game. I do all of my social media, pretty much all my, posting, all my trailers. I make all those myself, and the list goes on. But it's pretty much everything else.
Let's just simply say, are you tired? Because that's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's much better now that I'm only working on this game and not another game at the same time. But yeah, it's been an adventure. I've definitely pushed really hard, and I'm looking forward to launch, not only to get it out, but to relax a little bit.
Now, the game launches on the 31st of August, yes?
Correct, yep.
And what's this last month, this trek towards release date? How are you feeling? Like, what's your emotion level at? I have to think it's just a very heavy mix of anxiety and excitement.
Oh yeah, it swings day to day. A few weeks ago, I was kind of like, should I just delete this and run away? Like, would that be the safer option? And is this fun? I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm feeling really good right now. The release announcement was awesome. People were so positive. I had a demo in Steam's Next Fest in June just recently, and that went really, really well. I mean, tons of really positive response from that. And I have to constantly remind myself that, people have played it and they do like it. So it's probably not a terrible game. But really, I'm basically just playing through, making huge lists of things I want to polish or fix. And then I go through and I do all those fixes, and then I play through again. And it's definitely nerve-wracking as the time, the weeks kind of turn into nothing. But
as it dwindles down.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, tell me, what types of things end up on your list? Because, there's this really bad commercial from the 80s where it says, we need to polish up the graphics on level 2.
Yep.
What actually goes into refinement after you've released it or tested things? What do you do there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a huge gamut of little stuff. I'll controls has always been one of the biggest points of feedback on the game, and so I'm constantly, like, is this feeling okay? Like, am I giving enough time for the double click for this thing or that? And I try it a bunch, and I'll switch controllers to try it on, like, I'll be playing on gamepad and then on the keyboard, and like, I'll kind of tweak stuff. If I'll get to a point where, like, I'm having a hard time getting through an area, and then so it's like, okay, maybe it's like I need one less guy here, or too many spear guys are here, because they'll just like totally mess you up. And then it can be balanced stuff like that. I'll see little art things that like stand out to me that I don't like, or there's too many trees in the way, so combat's getting hard because you can't see anything. It's just like that, just tons of these little things that most of them take me as long as it takes me to write the note to fix it. Kind of thing. And then there's bigger stuff where it's like, okay, I need to make sure that this long scripted event kind of plays out well, and then I'll try to break it a bunch of ways and make sure that everybody can play through that you're never going to get blocked by something and not be able to make progress. That's obviously the kind of like the worst case scenario if you ever can't get past something,
right?
And just trying to break the game as much as I can. And yeah, it's just 1,000 little cuts like that.
Well, how easy is it to fix something based on player feedback? Let's say you get to September 2nd, you've been out for 3 days, and you're not happy with something that you want to go in and fix. Is that an easy thing to do, or is it a big undertaking?
I mean, to do the fix itself, it's probably really easy. Some issues will be harder than others, but for the most part, no one issue is ever really bad. Like, worst case, I have to spend a few solid days on something. But the slower part of the process is then needing to go back through certification to then release that patch. So, say a bug comes up day one, I probably have it fixed day one or day two, but then rolling that into a new build, testing that build and making sure that I didn't inadvertently break anything, going through certification for the platforms is the thing that's going to consume the most time in the end, and would be what would delay any responses like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I find fascinating for Xbox developers specifically, but that's not limited to, is how they have to balance control input with Microsoft's shift towards controllers, but also having cloud-based tech coming along the way, touchpad controls. Is that something that you have to, as the developer, worry about?
Yeah, totally. I mean, with mine coming to PC also, so I've got keyboard and mouse and then controller and stuff. And there's all these little things you have to, like, what happens when you turn the controller off, and what happens when you turn the console off, and all these very like console centric things that you do have to worry about, and your game has to respond a certain way to when that happens. And it's not bad. I mean, Unreal, luckily, which is the engine I'm using, has almost all of this stuff built into it in one way or another, and so I luckily am not like from scratch building a system like that. But you do have to kind of worry about all that sort of stuff.
What is it you're looking forward to most about people discovering Song of Iron?
I think in general, I'm just hoping that people who play it just sort of sit down and have fun being, a warrior and going through a nice, quick story. I mean, there's so many games out there these days, and, so often it's talked about like how hard it is to like get into these, 100-hour monsters. As fun as it is to do that sometimes, I hope people are just like, one of the things I really liked about Inside and Limbo was that, this one sitting experience in some ways. And I hope that I can deliver something like that and people can enjoy it. And I'm also very excited for people to unravel all the stuff I haven't talked about, about the
like
game.
What?
Yeah. But it's one of those things. It's like, I can't know until it happens, and I'm very excited to see how that goes, and if people like it as much as I do, or hate me for it or whatever. But very excited about it.
Well, my mind is racing now. It's like, all right, how could I extract more info there? Goodness. Well, there's a dreaded question that sometimes developers get put on the spot with, and it's, well, what are you going to do after? What's next? Do you get to think that far at this point in development, or is it something you're looking forward to, or is it all focused on release?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're, especially towards the end of a project, I've been doing this, like we said, 2 years, my mind is drifting, here and there off to like the next thing when it gets to be fresh and new again and everything. And I've always planned for this to be a trilogy from the very beginning. So I have the framework of the story for part 2 and part 3. And, assuming that this doesn't go, end up completely, I plan on supporting and extending the platforms a little bit, getting to different stores and so on. But I definitely
Does that
pretty
mean,
quickly.
I'm going to interrupt only to ask, does that
Yeah,
mean
go
you're
ahead.
trying to get to more storefronts like PlayStation and Epic and that kind of thing? What do you
Right
mean
now, yeah, the thought would be like, Good Old Games and Epic Store and stuff like that. As far as consoles are concerned, I'm not even thinking about them, to be totally honest, because
Gotcha.
they're a big beast, and I'm more than happy to be on Xbox for the moment. And
So it's a
yeah,
big certification type difference to get on PC fronts?
yeah, definitely.
Gotcha. Okay, I did not
Yeah.
know that. That's why I asked.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's like PCs are sort of I don't want to say regulated, but there's all this expectations of the consoles working and at a quality level, and everybody's got their own little niche bits of their consoles, and so there's way bigger process than PC.
Gotcha.
Um,
Prior to my interrupting you, you were
yeah,
mentioning that you had the story laid out, you have the trilogy ready to go in
yeah.
your mind.
So I'm jonesing to like get started on that already, and this is my first solo game like this. This is the first time I've engineered a game. This is the first time I've done all sorts of stuff, and so it's not perfect. Song of Iron 1 is not perfect by any means, and I'm excited to take all this knowledge and learning from building it, and then all the feedback I'll get from release. I'm so excited to then make a game that will inevitably be better for part 2. And yeah, really, really excited for that. But of course, got to stay focused for now for a
Sure.
little bit longer. But yeah, your mind drifts, and I am excited to do that.
Is there a financial reality that you have to face as a solo developer, having been an animator and working on AAA stuff for 15 years, and then to go solo? Surely you have to parse your finances a bit differently, prepping for launch and in development time. Is that a factor?
Oh, totally. I think hopefully that this game does well, and so that becomes less of a problem. But yeah, I mean, I basically turned my income into zero when I left 343, and I'm living off of savings. And luckily, my wife, who also works, is super supportive and is like, totally on my team for this and everything. And I couldn't ask for more, and that helps a lot as well. But yeah, it's it's a risk to leave, and with hopes and aspirations of that becoming a sustainable project and a sustainable kind of lifestyle. But yeah, at the moment, and this is another thing where the pandemic in some ways helps, is like I'm not going out and doing anything or traveling, or I'm just in my room and not spending money buying food and using electricity, and that's about it. And it definitely has helped kind of stretch that time. But yeah, I mean, like what I was just saying, like Song of Iron is not perfect, and both because it's my first time, but I also have time limitations, and not saying that it's a bad product because of it, but I could spend 100 years on it, of course, but no one wants that, and perfect is the enemy of done. So yeah.
One of the final questions I'll ask is that I get with a lot of indie developers, people ask, are you looking at Game Pass? Are you looking at PlayStation Plus? Are you looking at Xbox Live Games with Gold? That kind of stuff. Where do those things come into play from your perspective as a solo developer, looking out at different services that might give you publicity, it might give you an income note, or you might get drowned out? How do you balance the desire to be in there versus, soliciting it?
Sure, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think Game Pass would be the one that I'm most keen on at the moment. I think I'd be super excited to be part of that if I ever get that phone call. More than
So
happy
it's a
to.
call that comes to you, not you go to them.
Yeah, Game Pass is an authored list, basically. They're not, you can't just sign up for Game Pass, basically.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, if I get that call, I'm very happy to do that.
Interesting.
For sure. I mean, I think from everything that, any number I've seen or any of the sort of feedback from developers about it is it's all positives. So I'm very happy to say yes to that. But
Gotcha.
in general, it's a constant weighing of time and resources, because any one thing costs time and resources, and that may be building a demo for this thing, or putting a bunch of time into social media, or spending the time to attempt to get onto a service, kind of thing. And so at the moment, I'm just trying to, I mean, now at this point, with being so close to launch, I basically know where I'm at and where all the launch stuff is. And so everything else is just gonna have to wait till later, kind of thing.
Sure.
And happy to, it's always, unfortunate when I have to get a nice fun email. It's like, well, it's a little late. Appreciate the email. Let's talk after launch, and Game Pass would be the exception, because that's just a switch as far as I would imagine. But yeah, hopefully.
Well, let's get to letting people know where they can find your game when indeed it does release, and see if we can't point some more people towards Song of Iron. Let us know where to go for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Song of Iron is releasing August 31st of this year. Very exciting. It's coming to Steam and Xbox, and can be pre-ordered right now on Xbox Store, or you can go to songofiron.com and there's links to everything you need. And if you're a Steam person, wishlisting is just as good for me, and helps out a lot. And I'm most active on Twitter at Song of Iron, and that's where I usually give my weekly sort of GIF updates and talk about the game or where things are at. And it's a good thing to follow if you don't want to miss launch. Yeah.
Joe Winter, thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.